Hello to everybody who's taken the time to join us. So I'm Kimberly Diabald, General Manager for Simon AI and Revenue Intelligence at the Veracent Company. I joined Veracent about a year ago, and prior to that, I spent 20 years at IBM running sales teams. In my last job, I was the Vice President of Global Sales for all of the data science and AI products for IBM. So today's topic is near and dear to my heart. And I'm delighted to be here with you, and mostly excited about you being able to hear from one of our really premier experts in this space, Martin Fleming. So, Martin?
So thanks, Kimberly. And I am Martin Fleming. I am Veracent's Chief Revenue Scientist, which means I spend my time focused on research, development, product development, and client interaction. Like Kimberly, I also spent 20 years at IBM, the last 10 of which I was IBM's Chief Analytics Officer and Chief Economist. Some of you may know those are two, data science and economics are two disciplines that have come together in the technology industry, particularly in the US. So it's terrific now to have an opportunity to do this really important work with Veracent. So let me turn it back to Kimberly and we'll get started.
Sure, great. Let's go ahead and advance, Etzel. And let's go to the first slide. So as I think Savannah mentioned, we'll be monitoring the Q&A. So as we go through this, Martin and I like this to be very interactive. So, if you've got a question, drop it in the Q&A. If it's something I could just answer quickly, I'll do it. If it's something that I think we want to share with the team, I'll be happy to call that out as well. The slide looks a little bit funny. Is that just me?
No, I'm seeing the same thing.
Okay, let's just give it a second here and try to do another screen share.
Looks like we need more bandwidth somewhere along the line. Well,
I like all the shout outs in the chat from everybody. Hello in Grand Rapids and Texas and Kuwait. All right, here we go. All right. I think you need to, it's still kind of in funny.
Yeah. So let me, while Etzel's getting the charts set up, let me begin. As you may have quickly seen as the chart showed up, we've labeled the first chart the situation room. So let's just take a minute before we get into the, oh, look at that, terrific. Before we get into the results of our most recent research. And think about the situation that we find ourselves in, not only in the U.S. but globally. We often like to focus on this notion of the fourth industrial revolution. We're seeing increasing uses of advanced digital technology. When we say advanced digital technology, really focusing on predictive and prescriptive analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Generally, in the US, probably just a little beyond 10% of organizations have really mastered the capability, but it's growing and growing very rapidly. It also means that we see very significant investments in information technology, both equipment, hardware, as well as software, rapidly expanding, certainly across North America, but across Western Europe as well. And along with the tangible investments that we see being made are the intangible investments in skill and talent. All of this has gotten a tremendous boost, of course, with the pandemic, where we all have experienced an increased use of e-commerce and work from home. But beyond those applications, many other applications across many different business processes are now adopting advanced digital technology, including the sales and marketing job roles and professions. We will focus today, of course, on sales, but it's one of many business processes where we're seeing really significant advances occurring. And it's unlikely that we're going to return, in my view at least, to the pre-pandemic 2019 ways of doing business. We're seeing moving ahead very, very rapidly, and with leading edge organizations. And we're going to talk about leading edge organizations. What are the differences between the leaders and others in terms of their use of the technology? But increasingly, leading edge organizations sharing that knowledge being distributed and absorbed by other organizations as folks change jobs and skills improve. So we see investment in tangible and intangible capital, and we see increased knowledge sharing. And then finally, we see the opportunity as we go forward in the period ahead, and we measure this in relatively long periods, increased growth, increased job creation, increased income and wealth. So the fourth industrial revolution is very important and has really received an enormous boost, in my view, with the dislocation and unfortunately some of the destruction, if you will, that the pandemic has brought. But that's changed the way we do things. It's changed the way we sell. It's changed the way we engage with customers, as you all know. And in the center of the chart, we've highlighted three of those significant changes in the sales profession, focusing on landing and expanding a relationship, growing relationships with, as a result of the investment that we all make with our customers and growing those relationships and then expanding them over time. Of course, digital sales, we all have experience in our personal as well as our professional lives in the e-commerce space, growing very rapidly. And of course, increased self-service across a range of channels. So the whole notion of the channels of distribution are changing very rapidly as well. And for those who are able to be successful in this new sales environment, there's an opportunity for significant competitive advantage, being able to use the integrated data sets that are available and that can be built, and the automated tools that are now available to really assume a position of leadership. So that's a little bit about the situation that we find ourselves in. So today is the first time that Kimberly and I are presenting a new set of results, literally just out of the field with a survey of 300 sales leaders in the US. So we'll begin to share some of those with you now. And if we can go to the next chart, we'll give you a little bit of background. And we're going to do this first by asking you to participate with a polling question. So let's put the polling question up. And let's ask you to respond. What tools are you using as part of your sales forecasting process? And you can respond with all that apply. And let's see what results from this.
Martin, while we're waiting on that, a thought that came to my mind on the previous slide around the unique moment in time we are in history here around the fourth industrial revolution is the fact that any one of those things, COVID or moving from selling to land and expand, or all the different revenue streams and the relationships changing, any one of those would be disruptive enough to your businesses. The fact that these are all happening at the same time in an accelerated way because of COVID makes this the perfect storm. And many of you probably are feeling like you're just overwhelmed with the amount of information and change and complexity. So I think this is a timely study for us. Oh, this is interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. So we have almost 80% of the respondents with spreadsheets and using their CRM tools, in the 20% range with business intelligence tools, revenue intelligence, as well as in-house tools, and then a small, about 10%, with other capabilities. So let's see how that compares with our own survey. And guess what? It's not too far off. Generally, we find a little 80% plus using CRM capabilities, 80% or so spreadsheet, little bit more generally in business intelligence tools and in-house development tools, but about the same with revenue intelligence solutions. So those who have joined us here today are very, very similar, a pretty good representative group of what we see more broadly across sales leaders in the US. So let's now turn our attention to what our sample of respondents looks like. You can see that we have roughly evenly distributed respondents across the various industries. We have, as you can see, a little bit larger from technology, a little bit less from life sciences, but those two technology-related industries together are about get us to about the same percentage as all of the rest. And then you can also see that we have about 2/3 of mid-market, meaning less than $1 billion of revenue, and about 1/3 of enterprise respondents. So again, roughly the way the world looks, if you will, in terms of organizations. And we'll go to the next chart. And you can see in terms of the types of data and that are being used are coming from multiple sources. So this is an important point. We need to be able to integrate our data sets if we're going to be effective in forecasting. We have, of course, we all have abundant customer resource management CRM data from a variety of sources, the various providers of CRM data. And we need to be able to link that wherever possible with the outcomes data, that is the revenue or the finance data. And to the extent that there are other data sources, such as orders data or marketing data providing leads or conversions of leads into opportunities, and then, of course, operations data to understand the extent and the nature of the success of the relationship in terms of serving clients. So data integration becomes important, but of course, dominated by CRM data. So let's go to the next chart. So what are the first set of results? Over on the left-hand side, the most basic finding here that we have is that overall, about 20%, 21% of those sales leaders who responded to the survey responded that they are satisfied with their sales forecasts. So meaning, of course, 80% are unsatisfied. Now, there are some reasons for those who fall into the satisfaction category. First, about 40% of the respondents, 41% of the respondents, are sales leaders that are largely delivering services. And as many of you will know, services agreements tend to exist over an extended period of time. So it becomes a little bit easier to forecast because you know from period to period the services revenue that's going to be recognized. And that becomes a little bit easier forecasting problem to solve, and therefore a little bit higher satisfaction level. And also you see in the center of the chart, 43% of the sales leaders said their sales were largely transactional, meaning that they have lots of transactions, lots of data. And again, from a statistical point of view, when you have lots of data and lots of transactions, the noise to signal ratio goes way down and forecasting is a little bit easier. So therefore, 32% of this group were satisfied with their forecast. And then finally, 20%, as we noted a few moments ago, of the sales leaders who responded are using revenue intelligence tools, and they have the highest percentage in terms of satisfaction with their forecast, almost half, 47%. So we see some reasons to be satisfied. Some of it is the structure of the business in the services space, or a large number of transactional sales. That's a given. We can't change that. That's the hand we're dealt, so to speak. But that in part drives our satisfaction with our forecast. but also the use of revenue intelligence tools. So we're beginning to get a little bit of a first glimpse, if you will, in terms of how some of the forecasting efforts are being successful and where some of the challenges lie. So, Edsel, let's go to the next chart. We also find a very interesting relationship between the tenure of the sales leader and the satisfaction with their sales, with the sales forecast process. And you can see on the right-hand side of this chart that those sales leaders who were in their role for more than 24 months, and there was almost 2/3 of them, 64%, you can see in the bottom, 24% said they were satisfied. So part of the secret here is to be able to stay in a role for a long enough period of time to understand a bit about the business, understand what some of the challenges are, understand some of the issues that arise in producing a sales forecast. However, it also is certainly the case that it works in the other direction. That is, sales leaders who are successful in producing sales forecasts get to hold their jobs longer. So it works, it becomes a virtuous cycle where experience in the role as a sales leader provides an opportunity to improve forecasting ability, and then the forecasting ability adds to the sales leader's success. And then you can see, of course, in the middle and the left-hand side of the chart, those who have a little bit less time in role generally tend to be a little bit less satisfied as they're gaining experience over time. So we're beginning to get some insight around successful sales forecasting. Part of it is the use of revenue intelligence tools. Part of it is the hand you're dealt in terms of the structure of the business, services, and a large number of transactions. But part of it is also being in the role for an extended period of time and gaining some familiarity. And so let's go to the next chart. So finally, another important feature of what we see in successful sales forecasting is the difference between the business to business space and the business to consumer space. In the business to consumer space, we had about a quarter of our respondents in the business to consumer role industries or firms have a high, over 30% satisfaction rate. Generally tends to be often more stable businesses, large numbers of consumers, large number of distribution partners, perhaps distributing to a large number of store physical locations. So oftentimes an enormous amount of data, which can be challenging in and of its own right, but also provides an opportunity to make use of some of the really effective sales forecasting capabilities. The real challenges, and we see a little more than 3/4 of our respondents are in the business to business space, where oftentimes transactions are a bit lumpier, they're larger, they're more perhaps uncertain as the quarter progresses as to which transactions are likely to close and which may not close. And oftentimes it involves new clients, new logos, if you will, and expanding into new markets, new geographies, new customer sets, new customer segments. So a little bit more difficult sales forecasting situation. So Edsel, let's go to the next chart. And let me just take a pause there at that point. And I know Kimberly has a great deal of experience in this space. So let me see, Kimberly, what insights are you getting from this new research that we're rolling out here today?
Yes, thank you, Martin. What's interesting, I find, is when you think about all the complexities of all the variables that are changing, right? The type of products and services that organizations are selling in the marketplace, the behavior of how end users, whether they're businesses or consumers, are buying, and the speed of change. And you mix in there, quite frankly, the competitive threats. And so, what I often talk to organizations and leaders about is their challenge is there's not enough hours in the day, and they're doing still a lot of manual work, whether it's sitting on forecast calls, or it's manual roll up of forecast opportunities and things of that nature that start to eat up, instead of just 1 day a week, it ends up bleeding into 2 days and 3 days, hours and hours of resource work. And so what we're finding is that those clients who are recognizing the trends in the marketplace, the technology disruption, the opportunity, are recognizing that analytics, moving up the stack that Martin will talk about, getting into predictive as well as automated forecasting, automated insights and analytics, ends up giving leaders more time to find where the gaps in the business are, whether it's in a particular team or region or product, or maybe it's your channel, whatever that region is. And then once you're able to find that out, then you're able to take your personal time, your leader's time, and your resources and focus on the problem areas, and therefore having a high level of confidence that the items that are on track to happen, when you leverage analytics, you leverage machine learning and predictions and forecasting, that those will happen even if you don't put all your time into it. So the analytic maturity curve has been around for a long time, but the acceleration of people, and I think that's what came through in the study, is how many people would really like to move up this curve, but feel they don't really know how to do it, and some of those challenges. So that would be kind of one thought I had, Martin. And then there was a question in the chat I want to make sure that we answer, which is from Laura, around B2B forecasting in small teams, meaning a small organization that could just be 5 people. Obviously we have this survey that's been done, and we've categorized SMB, mid-market, and enterprise. Small companies, depending on the type of business you do, can still have complexities. I have a client I'm working with right now that is a startup, and they have less than 50 customers, and they have a fairly small sales team, but they have a complex market they're trying to crack and compete in. And what they're doing is you're using predictive analytics to analyze target accounts, do account scoring, lead scoring, because they want to put their time and energy where they can get the best return and best fit in the market. So even if you have a small team or a small number of clients, you can still leverage this, because most companies have a sea of prospective clients, hundreds of thousands, the one that I'm working with, and they're trying to segment how they go after these technology companies in a better way so that they can get that return. So hopefully that answered your question, Laura. If not, drop another note in.
I think that's great. That's a terrific point you're making, Kimberly, in terms of the size of the sales team is one consideration, but the real issue is the number of opportunities that teams have, and that's really where we're focused. So let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about, as Kimberly mentioned, the analytics maturity curve. And we'll just set a few definitions here, just so we're all thinking along the same lines. When we use the term descriptive analytics, we're really talking about looking through the rearview mirror, if you will, looking at past performance, understanding why we succeed or why we fail, and generating, if you will, post-mortem views of the business. Predictive analytics, as the term implies, we want to be able to use the data which we have to be able to predict what's coming in the future. And predictive analytics, let me just take a little bit of a tangent here and say, when we hear the term artificial intelligence or machine learning, they are really all about predictive analytics. So you shouldn't be scared off by something that seems like it's from a highly sophisticated space or something of that sort. Machine learning tools, which are becoming very common, are really a predictive capability. The simplest example that I often use to make the point is when you're typing a word in, you're typing a text and you're typing in a word, and your phone that suggests to you, tells you what word you're trying to type. That's predictive analytics. That's a little machine learning algorithm in your phone that's predicting the word you're trying to type. When you get on Netflix or when you get on Amazon and it suggests to you a video that you might want to watch or a product that you might want to buy, those are predictive analytics that are doing that work, and it's predicting what you may have an interest in. In this case, we're predicting where we think sales are going to. And then finally, prescriptive analytics helps us to understand what actions we may want to take. I'm sure many in the webinar today have been in a situation of presenting a sales forecast, and it takes less than 10 seconds before your senior leader says to you, okay, now tell me what we need to change to improve this outlook. So it's about prescribing actions to be taken to improve an outcome, a business outcome. So with those definitions in mind, let's go to the next chart. And now we're going to have our second polling question. Which type of analytic skill is your organization most proficient in? Descriptive, predictive, descriptive, predictive, or prescriptive? So take a second to go through and make your choice, and we'll see what the outcome turns out to be. And we'll give it a few seconds here for everybody to make their choices. I think we're probably going to be okay. There we go. So we have almost 60% descriptive and roughly 20% predictive and prescriptive. So 60, 20, and 20. So Edsel, let's go to the next chart and see how that compares. Again, similar to what our sample of respondents across the U.S. told us, sales leaders across the U.S., we have a high number of prescriptive respondents, about 40%. So it's a little bit more descriptive in this sample, where it was almost 60%, but roughly 20% predictive and prescriptive. But you notice here, this begins to give you a little bit of a clue as to where this is headed. Those who have the higher analytic skills, those more on the right-hand side of the chart, the 20% that were in the prescriptive space, have the higher satisfaction with their sales forecast. And those who have predictive analytics skills, the 20+%. We had 22% in our webinar here, was 26%. In our sample, have a little bit more than 43% satisfaction rate. And then for those who have descriptive skills, 34%. Recall way back in the beginning of when we were presenting our results, the overall satisfaction rate of sales forecasting is 21%. So just having even basic analytic skills, descriptive analytic skills are fairly basic, already improves your ability to forecast and results in greater satisfaction with the forecast that you're delivering to your business. So analytic skills seem to matter. So let's go to the next chart. And before we delve into what we see in some of the interesting industries here, let me take a pause and ask Kimberly to share some of her experience from an analytics perspective, and also if there are any questions or comments that we want to highlight.
Yeah, this is a good point. There's a question, a very good question that came up in the chat around if predictive analytics are the answer to successfully hitting your forecast, what's keeping folks from getting started? Which is an excellent point. Oftentimes, what we find in engaging, and I spend my day, and Martin does as well, speaking to multiple clients on every given day that we're engaged in the marketplace, is that it's usually about a couple of points. Number one is they don't have the skills. They don't have the individual on their team. Maybe it's a sales ops team or an analytics team that has the ability or the skills to really get beyond the basic Excel, CRM, BI tools kind of a set of capabilities. And so it's generally first and foremost a skill problem. Not having that experience and knowledge of how to move towards predictive and prescriptive. The second is it's generally having the right tool that then allows you to actually do that in an easy, automated, intuitive way so that it can be done quickly, because the business today has very little patience for a project that might take 6 months of re-engineering a process to get something up and running. So you need speed, you need a solution and a tool that allows you to do that. And then finally, you need a person, a sponsor, a leader. It's usually a sales leader or a chief revenue officer who is absolutely committed to moving from a business logic kind of organizational structure to a data-driven or data logic approach to your business. This really, when you get into predictive, which is the machine learning, is all about leveraging all the data that you have internally, which you may be challenged getting access to. So that's something you have to overcome. And then getting that data internally and marrying it with external data, third-party data that you need to bring together in order to start to move to a data-driven predictive analytics machine learning approach to your business. And most people tell us they want to get there. They just A, have the challenge with the skill, B, don't have the right tool set, don't know where to go, don't have the right answer to get that done. And then lastly, don't have that sponsorship in order to move to data-driven. And last thing I'd say, and I'll pause and let Martin answer anything else he wants to add, is that people are still cautious about machine learning and AI. They want it to be explainable. They want it to be transparent and understandable. And so many solutions in the marketplace that have to do with revenue intelligence, they approach that AI as it's way too complicated for a client to understand. So we're going to actually keep it under the covers and make it a black box. We think the answer is you need a glass box. The AI, the machine learning, has to be transparent, has to be understandable. So you could run 2 sets of books when you're first starting this, the old way that you did your business and the new way, and get a level of confidence and trust to move forward and trust that data. So I'd probably say those are the elements. Martin, you might have something else you want to add.
Well, the only other point I would add is really just to emphasize it's not only the technology. The technology matters. The skill matters. It's not only the data science skill. It's also the business skill, and then the focus on how to do the transformation of the business process, as you're pointing out, being able to run an existing process in parallel with a new process to build confidence across the organization that there is improvement. And the champion, the point that you made, I would emphasize, is critically important. We've encountered situations where the most senior leader in the organization just gets so frustrated with arguments about what the forecast is and what it's going to be, just brings it to an end and says, we're only going to use the forecast that our forecasting team produces, and not be having the warring forecasts. So the transformation with the leadership, as well as building the skill, both the business skill and the data science skill across the organization, the transformation matters. And that's where really a lot of the hard work ends up being placed.
There's an interesting another comment. I'll just for 1 second here is a
Sure.
that I think put in here, which is this particular group on this call today, 60% are focused in as a business around the descriptive. That's where their skill level is. So again, that is still that's from a return on investment around data, like getting knowledge and insights and trends and patterns at the descriptive level has a value, but that incrementally increases as you go up that analytic curve and you get better insights, better patterns, better opportunity and competitive advantage as you move up that curve. So if you're doing descriptive today, awesome. It's the right way to start if that's where you are. But then you need to start thinking about what is the use case, because I spend a lot of time with clients talking about that first use case you do that's predictive. It needs to be the right one. It needs to be easy. It needs to be impactful. It needs to be visible. And if you pick the right one, you don't have to redo your entire organization and your entire forecasting process and your entire sales organization. You just need to start with a single use case that makes sense for what your business pain point is today. All right, Martin.
Terrific. So let's take a look at a few industries, and you can see them on the chart. And the percentages at the bottom are those that we showed earlier. And you notice on the right-hand side of the chart, the technology and life sciences industries, two very deeply technology-driven or focused industries, have the lowest level of satisfaction with their sales forecast. So we gave ourselves a challenge. We said, if those are the industries that are having the toughest time, can we find anyone in those industries who are succeeding at sales forecasting? What's the difference? Why is the satisfaction so low? And which respondents are doing well and which are doing poorly? So let's go to the next chart. First of all, we can see that the issue with satisfaction is even more severe in these industries, in the technology industries, and I'm using one technology to encompass both technology and life sciences. Using the technology industries, satisfaction is even lower with larger organizations. So you have very large organizations with the numbers of employees being quite large, and the large enterprises are the ones who are feeling the most challenge. Let's go to the next chart. We also see that in these technology industries, they have greater use of CRM, of business intelligence tools, and of revenue intelligence tools. So perhaps it's not surprising. Technology industries generally tend to have a bit more analytic skill than some others. So they're users of some of the more sophisticated, if you will, tools that are available to be able to tackle their forecasting challenges. And you can see that there are in these three instances statistically significant differences in the use of these tools. Let's go to the next chart. But these industries also have very challenging forecasts, and that's part of the reason why the satisfaction is lower. You can see that expansion revenue is much more important, and new logos, bringing on new clients, new client relationships are much more important. So these are much more variable types of transactions, subject to greater uncertainty, whether a deal is going to close or not, or how long it takes to bring a new client on and convince the client that there is an important offering that they should be taking advantage of, and then growing and expanding that relationship. So again, we see two statistically significant differences that define the nature of the business and the nature of the revenue, which makes the forecasting even more challenging because their transactions tend to be larger and lumpier than in other industries. We don't have time today to take you through some of the other industries, but if you looked, for example, at the manufacturing industry, where there's higher levels of satisfaction, generally tend to have large numbers of smaller product-like transactions, and in many instances, quite surprisingly, in manufacturing industry, services transactions as well. So large volumes of transactions. But in the technology industries, expansion revenue, new logo, new client relationships become much more important. Let's go to the next chart. So then we ask, what kind of skills are being used? So we see that for the, first of all, the overall industry satisfaction rate on the far right-hand side, recall from a previous chart, 13%, lower than the 21% across all of our respondents. In these two industries, very low satisfaction. But look at the level of satisfaction for those with the various different types of analytic skills. With prescriptive analytic skills, 47%, more than 3 times. Predictive analytics skills, 39%, so 3x the overall satisfaction. And you can see ad hoc analytics and scenario type what if analytics, high satisfaction rates. So in these industries, even where the forecasting challenges are much greater, the analytics skills play even larger and result in even higher levels of satisfaction when those skills are available. And of course, all of the other elements that come together that Kimberly described earlier around being able to integrate the data and manage the forecast process and identify a champion and being able to support the organization in that way. So that is, if you will, a bit of the punchline that we get to by looking at the toughest, most challenging forecasting problem, and we see that the tools and the capability really matter here. So let's go to the next chart. So before we begin to summarize some of what we've learned, let me take another pause and see if there are other comments. And I know Kimberly has a lot of experience in this space, particularly in some of these challenging forecasting situations.
Yeah, what I don't see any more questions in the chat, but I have a thought about a client that I'm working with right now. On the slide, you talked about the complexities of life sciences and technology, where they do a lot of expansion and total revenue. They worry about client churn. They worry about new logos and so forth. What's interesting is once you're able to get into predictive analytics and you're able to do automation around the data feeds that feed into a solution like this, right? So you're moving from manual, where you're pulling it into Excel and you're pulling in your CRM and you're manipulating that data and doing it all in a manual way. When you move to automation and you move to prediction, a couple of things begin to happen. Is you are able to free yourself of time, number one, if you're in the sales organization or sales operations specifically, and you're able to put more time into high value areas of analytics, such as ad hoc analysis. So many of our clients tell us that when you start to look at data-driven analytics, it provides you an opportunity to ask 10 more questions you never thought about, because you see a pattern, you see a trend, you see a gap that you really the sea of data that's out there you didn't know existed. So now what you want to go to your sales ops person and say, wow, that's really insightful. Now it asks me, I want to ask 10 more questions. We did a project recently for a client who had a very complex channel go to market with distributors. And although they were doing well in their overall channel performance and revenue was going up and they were hitting their growth numbers, they didn't really understand how each of those individual channel partners were performing, and going even a level deeper, how they were performing at the product level. And why that mattered is not just inventory and being able to manage that. They have a lot of software around that. But more importantly is, are there behavioral changes with those partners where you could maybe do what we call defection detection early? What does that mean? That means a potential partner could had another vendor come to them and say, hey, stop selling product A, my competitor, start using my product. I have a better quality, better value, better margin, you'll make more money, whatever. And if you are selling many, many products through that channel, you may not realize that product A is actually declining in that partner because you're looking at the total revenue line. But once you look at product performance, you can start to, with AI, start to see where patterns and behaviors are changing. And you can ask yourself, is it changing because of the market? Is it changing because my product is not good enough? Or is it changing because another vendor is coming in and taking that business away from that partner and from me? And could I take an action on that? So again, once you start to get into this kind of a data-driven approach to your business, you start uncovering new insights and determining other areas that you could focus on. Again, identifying areas of risk, of churn, of decline that you can actively choose to put your time and energy around, versus where the business is growing and is going to do fine without your attention. So just a point, it's a use case we just did for a client, and it really was a powerful set of analysis that we came up with.
Yeah, understanding the risk to the business is incredibly important. So let's try to tie this together a bit. And you see on the chart here, we've represented all of the respondents and where they fit. And the top two panels across the top of the chart, the 4% and the 17% adds together to the 21% we talked about at the outset of those who are satisfied, are highly satisfied with their forecasting process. But you can see that it really breaks down into two groups. There are 17% who really are the superstars. They have high levels of satisfaction, they have high analytic skills, and they have the process under control. The other 4%, there'll always be a group with relatively simple applications where a lot of the tools and capabilities are really not going to add the incremental benefit for the investment that's going to be necessary. And it's not surprising that that number is in the low single digits. And we see this kind of business case in many of the applications around artificial intelligence and machine learning. But what's really interesting is the 80% or the 79% represented on the bottom part of the chart. Almost 60%, 58% of our respondents are in the lower left-hand corner, which on any 2x2 is where you don't want to be. We have the vast bulk of sales leaders who have low analytic skills and have low levels of satisfaction with their forecast process. Why does that matter? It actually, I would assert, is very important. And this goes back to where we started our discussion around the changes that we're seeing in the way the world is functioning and operating. We're unable to forecast our sales accurately, which means if we're in a services organization, maybe we don't have the resources necessary to deliver our service and satisfy customers. If we're in a manufacturing environment, where maybe we don't have the supply chain capability or bandwidth necessary to deliver the product that's necessary. Or maybe in other instances, we have overspecified, whether it's the number of folks who are delivering a service or we're overproducing product and sitting in inventory, and our supply chain is delivering products that are not being used. So we have an opportunity to improve the efficiency, not just of our own operation, but more generally. The world can operate in a more efficient and effective fashion. That means more revenue, more sales, more income, and generally greater wealth. And then finally, we have in the lower right-hand corner a group of folks with high skill that still remain unsatisfied with much work left to be done. So this gives you a bit of a benchmark in terms of where we see these forecasting capabilities rolling out or lying on the map here these days in terms of where the world sits. And then let's go.
Martin, we have a really good question, so stay on this slide from Savannah, which is, what are the ways that one can go from being a body politic to a superstar? How do you go from bottom left to the right, top right?
Yeah, so I think I would say it really summarizing many of the comments that Kimberly has made. Number one, we need to have the forecasting or the analytics skill. And number two, we need to have the business skill to know how the forecast works and how effective it is across the organization. Number three, we need to have a champion across our organization who values the improvement in the process. And then number four, we need to have a transformation process that allows us to find the right place to begin, to have a successful initial case, if you will, to demonstrate the value that can be created, and then more broadly be able to transform across the organization. So at a high level, those are the four places where I've had success and have seen success in the past, focusing on being able to move into more of a superstar category. So let's go to the next, which is the penultimate chart. So there are 3 points we want to leave you with. One is that it is certainly possible to consistently deliver accurate and quality sales forecast. And we say accurate, we mean the ability to forecast within a reasonable margin of error what the outcome is going to be in a given quarter or a given time period. In quality, meaning some detail, some depth to the forecast around maybe it's a geography dimension or a product dimension, to be able to arrive at a forecast early enough in a period that it can be useful over the course of the period for business planning purposes. The forecasts that are changing radically from week to week and month to month are less useful than those that are able to arrive at a reasonably accurate number at the outset of the period. So quality forecasting has a number of dimensions. Secondly, actionable insights to improve forecasting and the ability to implement the automation that allows us to save time and to use our time more effectively. And Kimberly gave a couple of great examples of organizations organizing lots and lots of conference calls to review all of the forecasts that everybody's coming up with is not a good use of time. And this is an application where automation becomes augmenting to the role that we're in, and it frees up time to allow more effective selling, deeper customer relationships, and discovering new opportunities to allow our customers to succeed. So we can get actionable insights, and we can do it in an efficient way. And then finally, we've spoken about revenue intelligence tools, and of course, data integration. We talked about a number of different data sources that we see being used here, being able to bring those data sources together, integrate the data, and use that for the use of predictive analytics for higher levels of satisfaction, which is what we see across sales leaders who are able to take those steps. So then let's go to the last chart and let me hand it back to my friend Kimberly. Kimberly.
Thank you, Martin. So listen, this is just a sampling of the study that we're finalizing. I'd say this is probably about 25% of the insights. We hope to have it wrapped up and publishable in the month of April. So, you're welcome to let us know if you would like to get a full copy of the study. Alternatively, if you find this interesting enough and you want to really engage on a one-on-one basis around the deep dive of the study and how it might apply to your organization, we would also welcome the opportunity to have that discussion with you when the study is final. And you can just drop an email to me here, kdiabald@verison.com, and I will get you scheduled for that further discussion. So hopefully we've put in place a number of things for you to think about, but it's all about getting back your hours, nights, and weekends so that you can be much more successful and be able to leverage this really new wave of technology, the next new era of technology around AI, to really outperform in your jobs and for your companies.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. I believe that is it from Martin and Kimberly. We are so excited to have you, and we'll be excited to have you again later this week. So make sure you tune in on Thursday. But that's it for today. So everybody have a fantastic rest of your day and week, and we will talk to you later. See ya.